What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Fellows YouTube channel. My name is Tyler Plath, back at you with another Monday waiver wire video after a week 7 where you just have to throw up your hands, laugh it off, and just say, what the heck was this week? We saw teams like Miami and Detroit just look absolutely punchless. We saw the Bills lose to the Patriots. We saw Bijan Robinson, one of the most exciting players in fantasy football this year, only have one touch among so many other head-scratching and confusing things that happened. But now that week 7 is complete, mostly complete because this will be up before Monday Night Football, but still, now that we are mostly past it, it is time to look forward and start building out our rosters even more with our waiver wire ad. So before I begin, make sure you're subscribed. Give this video a like and drop any other ad or drop questions, suggestions you may have in the comments below, and we will answer those as they come in. And with that, we'll get started with Rams running back Darrell Henderson, who led the Rams backfield in week 7. He saw 39 snaps to Royce Freeman's 29. He ran 13 routes to Freeman's 8 and got 18 carries to Freeman's 12. And that was great to see after Henderson signed with the Rams practice squad last Tuesday and then was elevated for the game. But the practice squad signing for me was a clear signal that he was going to be the lead back moving forward just because of his experience and familiarity, with Sean McVay's offense. And because of that, he's one of the biggest priority ads for this week. He's going to continue being the lead back, especially with Kyren Williams landing on IR now. So we're going to get at least 3 more games with Darrell Henderson leading this backfield. So again, one of the biggest waiver ads this week, Darrell Henderson, if you're looking for running backs. But if you're looking for a wide receiver, it's looking pretty thin out there, but there is one guy that you need to go get, and that is Colts wide receiver Josh Downs, who is still somehow available in about 40% of leagues between ESPN, Yahoo, and Sleeper leagues combined. And now Josh Downs has 3 straight weeks where he's finished inside the top 30 wide receivers. In 4 out of his 5 weeks, he's finished with double-digit fantasy points. Since week 3, he's the wide receiver 13, the wide receiver 18 in fantasy points per game. Now, a free play, busted coverage, 59-yard touchdown helped Downs' finish this week. But the fact that the wide receiver 13 since week 3 is still available in majority of leagues, and we're not just talking about him as a rotational piece for bye weeks and injuries and stuff like that. We're talking about him as a guy that should be in your lineup until further notice. There are, like I said at the very beginning, there are not many viable wide receiver options on waivers this week. But if you need one, Josh Downs is your guy because of his continued production. Downs is your saving grace if you need a wide receiver this week. Emari Demercado is the next guy, and he took over the Cardinals' backfield in week 7. Friend of the channel, Dave Kluge, tweeted out that Demercado had a 94.7% opportunity share against the Seahawks. An opportunity share is just a fancy term that we use that refers to the percentage of a team's total carries and targets for a specific player. When you hear 90% or more in opportunity share, yeah, that means they get a ton of volume, okay? And that's what Demercado is going to continue getting until James Conner comes back. We saw Keontae Ingram have 0 touches, and he is now likely the running back 3 in this offense behind Damian Williams. So again, Demercado is going to be a guy that gets a ton of volume, and because of that, he's a fringe starter in most weeks. Now, the Cardinals do have Baltimore, Cleveland, and Atlanta in their next 3 games, so that's why I say he's a fringe starter. But at the end of the day, volume is king, and that's exactly what Demercado is going to continue getting in this offense. We're moving right along here to Titans running back Tyjae Spears, who is coming off the bye week, and this is traditionally where we see rookies get an uptick in either volume or usage. And when you take a look at the current situation in Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill is unlikely to play in week 8, and that's something to take note of because that came out during the bye week. That actually came out on Sunday. So technically, it's the in-between of we're coming back from the bye week, but still, to me, that's the bye week. So being already labeled as doubtful in the bye week, that could be more serious than we thought. So that means it's Malik Willis or Will Levis under center for at least 1 week. And neither of those guys have given anybody any sort of confidence. So to take the pressure off of them, I wouldn't be surprised if the Titans rely on the run game just a little bit more. So yes, that means Derrick Henry is obviously going to get his, and he's going to get a ton of volume. But don't be surprised if Tyjae Spears, who outsnapped Derrick Henry for the third time this year in week 6 before their bye week, shout out to Lucas for that stat, don't be surprised if Tyjae Spears also gets an uptick in volume. Spears is proving to be one of the most valuable handcuffs in fantasy football this year, and there's potential for some standalone value if we get that uptick in value in week 8. I mentioned that with Josh Downs, there are not many wide receiver options, and if you need a receiver, this is the other guy that you got to go look for. If you can't get Josh Downs, it's Kendrick Bourne. And Bourne has emerged as the Patriots wide receiver one on the back of 2 straight weeks in the top 15 wide receivers, and there's some intrigue with Kendrick Bourne moving forward. Kendrick Bourne is the only wide receiver on the Patriots to run more than 30 routes in those 2 weeks. And we're seeing less of Hunter Henry. We're seeing less of Juju Smith-Schuster before he got hurt. And we're seeing less of Devontae Parker, which is creating opportunity for Bourne to shine. He has had a 29% target share, and he's being targeted on 27% of his routes in those 2 weeks. That kind of usage puts him square in the conversation for flex consideration as the wide receiver 7 in these 2 weeks. He's got a very strong argument to be put into your lineup moving forward. Again, the Patriots have not been great on offense, but if there are 2 players that you want on the Patriots, it's Ramondre Stevenson and Kendrick Bourne. I don't want to brag about this one, but people were very confused, and they went to the extent of calling us crazy for saying that we were out on Dameon Pierce for a litany of reasons, but one of those reasons being that they acquired Devin Singletary in free agency. And while it wasn't looking too great through the first 5 weeks, we saw a change in week 6. Devin Singletary outsnapped Dameon Pierce 31-21, and he ran twice as many routes as Dameon Pierce. Now, I don't necessarily think it's a huge indictment on Dameon Pierce moving forward, because he did still get all the work inside the 5 and short down in distance, and did have more rushing attempts than Devin Singletary. But what was once a workhorse role just purely based on snaps, it may be no more for Dameon Pierce. And I'll clarify again, Pierce still has value, but it's just not what it used to be. And Singletary could become a fairly valuable handcuff if we continue to see this backfield split snaps and work like they did before they went into their bye week. Things can change coming out of the bye week, so this is one to keep tabs on more than likely. But don't be surprised if we see more Devin Singletary moving forward in this Texans offense. The Giants have been a very inconsistent team so far this year, but we're seeing a change in their wide receiver room, and it involves Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, who we mentioned last week on this waiver video, and rookie wide receiver Jalin Hyatt. Over the last 2 weeks, Jalin Hyatt has been second in routes run on the Giants, only behind Darius Slayton. Now, Hyatt hasn't put up any big receiving numbers in those games, but we used this logic with Jackson Smith and Jigba on one of our podcast episodes, and I will put the disclaimer out there. I'm not saying that Jalin Hyatt is Jackson Smith and Jigba, but what I am saying is that the natural progression for a rookie wide receiver to start producing in fantasy football, at least, is first getting on the field more. That's what we saw with Jackson Smith and Jigba in week 6. That's what we're seeing now with Jalin Hyatt in this Giants offense. Hyatt is much more of a long-term play than he is anything in the short term. But if you're looking for a rookie that could start producing some fairly decent results by season's end, Jalin Hyatt is worth the look then. And the last player that we'll mention here before discussing our streamers of the week is Ezekiel Elliott. And it feels weird discussing two Patriots players in one video, but here we are. The reason that we're mentioning Zeke is for a similar reason that we mentioned Devin Singletary and Tyjae Spears. There's handcuff value with Zeke at this point. Ramondre Stevenson did outsnap Zeke 39-21 in Week 7 and ran more routes and had more targets than Zeke by a lot. But Zeke still found the end zone. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Zeke is the goal line back in this offense, but when you look at touches inside the 10 and inside the 5-yard line, Zeke does have more touches than Ramondre Stevenson in those down distances. So while Zeke likely won't be touching your starting lineup unless you're real desperate and you've just got no other options, Zeke is enough of a thorn in Ramondre's side that it provides Zeke some handcuff value. And this backfield has been sorted out now, where we've seen back-to-back weeks of a heavy dose of Ramondre Stevenson. So don't go too crazy for Ezekiel Elliott, but understand that Zeke is doing just enough to be a relevant handcuff. And if you have Ramondre Stevenson, you may want to cover your bases and add Zeke just in case we see more downward trends like we had at the beginning of the season with Ramondre. All right, now on to our streamers of the week at quarterback and tight end. And our quarterback stream is CJ Stroud. And the Texans take on the Panthers in Week 8. And Carolina has been okay against opposing quarterbacks on the year. But it really is just by process of elimination that CJ Stroud is our quarterback stream of the week. Because I don't really know who else it would be. You could look at Matt Stafford, but he takes on the Cowboys. You could look at Russell Wilson, but he goes up against the Chiefs again. You could look at Sam Howell against the Eagles, but I don't know if you really want to trust the Commanders' offense at this point outside of Brian Robinson or Terry McLaurin. Daniel Jones against the Jets? I don't think so. Baker Mayfield against the Bills? No. Derek Carr against the Colts? Maybe, but still don't really trust Derek Carr's shoulder in this offense, especially with the play calls that we saw against Jacksonville. Kenny Pickett against the Jaguars, Desmond Ridder against the Titans, Gardner Minshew against the Saints. Like, there really is no other quarterback stream other than CJ Stroud. So, again, by process of elimination, CJ Stroud is our quarterback stream, and our tight end stream is Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. And Ferguson gets the Rams in Week 8, and going into Week 7, the Rams were allowing the third most fantasy points on average to tight ends, according to our friends at Fantasy Life, Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. Great tools that they have over there. But now the Rams only gave up 4.3 fantasy points to Steelers tight ends in Week 7, so that number is going to go down a bit. But their defense is prone to giving up big numbers to tight ends. We saw that against Philly. We saw that in 2 other weeks where they gave up over 20 fantasy points to tight ends. Those big numbers give me enough reason to feel confident in Jake Ferguson hitting your lineups this week as your tight end stream if you need it. That'll do it for Week 8 waiver wire ads and the 10 guys that we discussed in this video. Darrell Henderson, Josh Downs, Emari Demercado, Tyjae Spears, Kendrick Bourne, Devin Singletary, Jalin Hyatt, Ezekiel Elliott, CJ Stroud, and Jake Ferguson. Thanks for tuning into this video, and as I said at the very top of the video, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on all the great content that we are posting every single day for you. Give this video a like, and again, leave a comment below with other waiver suggestions you may have. Questions on, can I drop this player? Should I add this player? Drop it down below and we'll answer them as they come in. We'll be back tomorrow with 12 players who are trending or ending after Week 7 on the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. So until then, deuces.